they have this problem, and they share it with the government agency, they share it with the operator, and they're told, that's not our jurisdiction, that's not our problem, we need to talk to this other person. And so not everything that's going to be talked about on this panel is strictly going to be pipeline safety, or strictly PHMSA or State Pipeline Safety Program jurisdiction, but that's okay. A lot of it will, and we'll have plenty of time over the rest of the conference to have those really specific discussions. But again, we wanted to have the community voices just feel welcome. So we're just going to go in alphabetical order. So we're going to start first with Angelle Bradford, who's the volunteer manager with the Sierra Club Delta chapter. And I believe we have a slideshow for Angelle.
Yeah.
There you go. So yeah, green button.
So just green button. All right. All right, thank you all for having me. My name is Angelle Bradford. I'm from Baton Rouge. I live in New Orleans, and our Sierra Club Delta chapter really works across the state of Louisiana in both urban and rural communities. I wanted to show this slide first just because growing up, it was always emphasized to call before you dig, call before you dig. And I don't think we realized, especially in Baton Rouge, which is it's heavy industry, just how much pipelines were right below almost everything here in Louisiana. And so it's been kind of an adventure over the past couple of years to recognize just how much pipelines are a part of our life and a part of our emergency response. And yeah, this is just a picture that I never get over of the interstate and intrastate pipelines, which pretty much cover all of Louisiana. And that's something I think a lot of Louisianans don't realize until we have a particular project show up at our door. So what does pipeline safety mean to me? And sorry that it's covering part of the words, but for us and for me, with the Sierra Club Delta chapter, it means less pipelines, so less proliferation. And I'll talk a little bit more about our work with LAFS, which is our coalition that we're a part of, that's pushing back on the carbon pipelines that are proposed for Louisiana. But what that looks like for us is, less energy use and less proliferation of pipelines, more energy efficiency across all communities in Louisiana. And it also means that we focus our attention towards emissions reductions, which obviously Sierra Club always does that. But a lot of our local work is direct site fights or really trying to put forth alternatives when it comes to energy use. And one of our big things is transit. And so we've been focused on public transit and worker power across Louisiana, particularly in places that already have transit agencies. And so yes, it is kind of a leap. People are always like, well, why don't you just focus only on industry? And what's the Sierra Club doing talking about transit? But for us, it's a holistic approach in reducing carbon emissions and having the right conversations about what solutions are possible for Louisiana. And that doesn't look like more industry. Some of our bigger fights include here in New Orleans when it comes to public transit. So we have the New Orleans Regional Transit Authority that has dealt with the fiscal cliff that a lot of transit agencies are dealing with. And so we've been working with our partners to really strengthen their operator and rider presence, as well as really honor some of those union agreements that they have with their operators. And we also focused on Baton Rouge because as the capital city, it does not have the transit system that it needs, and it's not honoring workers no matter which industry or which field they are in. And so that's been kind of our bread and butter for the past couple of years, which has also led us to legislative session, which is a big thing for us. And so whether talking about transit or talking about pipelines, we have to go to our state legislature, and it has really been balls to the walls the last couple of years with them. We have worked with Louisiana Against False Solutions, our coalition of about 20 organizations, to really try and get regulation around carbon pipelines while also pushing for investment in local transit agencies and energy efficiency and renewables, and also strengthening regulations. And so one of the big pushes for us this year, was that June, the hearings? Okay, so the June primacy hearings that we had with the Department of Natural Resources and EPA in Baton Rouge, we had such a big push for it and such a call for it from community members that they ended up having multiple days instead of just one. And it was in person, not just virtual, which was pretty awesome. And we're still waiting on that decision. But yes, that's kind of our things right now. And then how did we arrive at this perspective towards carbon pipelines, oil and gas pipelines, or our approach and strategy? That really came from 2017, 2018, it might have been earlier than that, all the years merged, but it was the Bayou Bridge Pipeline Project, which really galvanized a lot of our members because it was a very difficult time, quite frankly. Not only was it an extension of other major fights across the country, but it was something that we really wanted to see our government stand with us in, and ultimately they did not. And so because of that, with this 162-mile-long crude oil pipeline that goes through the Trosclair Basin, which is one of the most precious watersheds in the world, let alone in the United States, our organizations and our coalitions were really challenged by this. And so it has impacted our organizing community. It has impacted our landscape of how we do protest and then how we're allowed to protest. Just because after that in Louisiana, they really clamped down on how the legislature, being they, how we're allowed to protest and where as it pertains to pipeline infrastructure. And I'm sure we've seen it across multiple states, but here was really ground zero around Bayou Bridge Pipeline. And then it also really humbled our understanding of the regulations of the law, because it felt like you would be in court one day and the judge would make it very clear that this company should not be moving forward on this pipeline. And they would do it anyway, and they would dredge anyway. And our partners, the Trosclair Basin Keepers, see the daily impact of not backfilling properly those canals, and also see the further desire to privatize, dredge, and impact our Trosclair Basin. And then also our trust, so like how we build trust with one another was really challenged by that Bayou Bridge Pipeline, and it really forced us to have more honest conversations about organizing our principles, how we show up publicly and internally. And then just other ways in which pipelines are challenging our lives in Louisiana. So, you know, it seems like a stretch, but at the same time, when we were dealing with the saltwater crisis, and a lot of our parishes are, including Plaquemines Parish and out in St. Bernard, New Orleans got lucky. Like, it was kind of a miracle, honestly, that we ended up not having the crisis that they thought we would have, because now I think we realize we were not prepared. But then in addition to that, we've also been dealing with an underwater peat fire, which was another level of hell that we did not think was possible. And fighting that fire has been very complicated because there's pipelines and debris that block access to it. And so that's a conversation where just a couple of weeks ago, we were wondering if our city council and our mayor even had a plan for this, because it wasn't being elevated like other fires across Louisiana have been during the drought. We also deal with the challenge of what it will look like with different administrations in our state regulating these pipelines, and also not having an emergency preparedness plan for them. And then also, of course, like, you know, considering who will be running our Department of Natural Resources, what those agencies can be trusted to do. If they can't handle the current infrastructure, these are the same folks that we're looking to regulate our carbon pipelines, let alone abandoned wells, et cetera. And so more than anything, it's just been a challenging couple of decades as we look at how dense our oil and gas infrastructure is in Louisiana without a plan for the future. So that's all the things in 10 minutes. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Angelle. Next, we have Virginia Palacios. She's the Executive Director of Commission Shift. So she is not representing a Gulf community in the way that a lot of these other panelists are, but I've just been so impressed with Virginia and Commission Shift's work that I was really excited to invite her to share her perspective today.
It's not exactly alphabetical. And Texas is still a Gulf state, so I will be bringing in some examples from the Gulf. So I'm Virginia Palacios. I'm the Executive Director of Commission Shift. We're a 2.5-year-old nonpartisan nonprofit We're a statewide organization in Texas, but we're headquartered in Laredo, which is my hometown, down on the border of Mexico. So I'm a fourth generation ranch owner in Webb County, which is the highest natural gas producing county in Texas. And I have a gas transmission line that goes through the front of the ranch along the highway, and then in the back of the ranch, there's a rural gathering line. I'm going to give some examples from just like my personal perspective, living in an area that has a lot of natural gas pipelines and development. They're not the worst examples in Texas, but just to give us some perspective on some of the issues throughout Texas that need to change in public policy, both at the state level and preferably at the federal level to protect everyone. So our organization is focused on reforming oil and gas oversight in Texas by building public support to hold the Railroad Commission of Texas accountable to its mission in a shifting energy landscape. And for those who don't know, the Railroad Commission has nothing to do with railroads. This is our state oil and gas agency. They have a great mission statement that includes stewardship of natural resources and the environment, concern for personal and community safety, but we do not often see them prioritizing those two parts of their mission statement. And so that is why Commission Shift exists, because the public needs to have a voice and the public needs to be cared for. And so I'm from Encinal. This is a small town, a population of about 580 people. This is in LaSalle County. My ranch is just south of the county line. And so my dad woke up one morning in 2015 to a loud boom and took this photo from the ranch, which is about 3.6 miles as the crow flies from this facility. It was a gathering facility that had a big explosion and is located right next to the local elementary school. Thank God this happened in the middle of the night. Nobody was harmed, no injuries, but there is no reason why this facility had to be built so close to town and so close to an elementary school. This facility could have gone anywhere within at least a 1 mile radius and been far away from any homes or any populated areas. And so my point is there is no oversight authority in Texas over pipeline siting or eminent domain, and the public never gets to weigh in on where this infrastructure is placed. And this, as we know, this infrastructure is not always safe, even though we have safety rules. So that little yellow dot that you see on the map right there is about the location of Encinal, about the location of where I live. And I was concerned when I saw this map. This was a methane satellite that picked up this super emitting pipeline leak. And when I reached out to the Railroad Commission for the coordinates and the location of this leak, they told me that I would have to wait until the investigation was complete, which would have been about a month away from when it happened. And I just don't think that's correct. That's not the way to operate a public agency. That information should be readily available to the public. And these natural gas leaks and explosions are common throughout the state of Texas. Every month on the Railroad Commission's open meeting agenda, we see hundreds of pipeline safety incidents and violations. And the most important thing with all of this is that we have a problem with conflicts of interest at the Railroad Commission. The Railroad Commissioners get 2/3 of their campaign contributions from the same companies they oversee. And the majority of those campaign contributions come from wastewater disposal companies and pipeline companies. Kinder Morgan and Energy Transfer both show up on Railroad Commissioner Christy Craddock's personal financial statement that she submits to the Texas Ethics Commission. And just yesterday, she and her fellow commissioners voted to approve a waiver for a Kinder Morgan pipeline that's going to go through a residential community that will allow them to exceed the maximum allowable operating pressure in that pipeline. And that these kinds of things shouldn't be happening, and it appears that there is bias in the commissioner's decision-making because they are not recusing themselves from these decisions and because they have these financial interests. And so I want to talk about another issue that's going on in Texas right now. There is a proposed pipeline for the Saguaro Connector Pipeline. This is a pipeline that is going to start in Texas and take Texas gas through Mexico to an LNG export facility on the Pacific coast, and it will ship gas to Asia. There's no benefit to Texans or Mexicans for this pipeline. And it has been segmented so that 155 miles of the pipeline will start and end within the state of Texas and be under the Railroad Commission's jurisdiction. And only 1,000 feet that cross the border of Mexico will be under FERC or oversight authority. And so this means that nobody's going to be looking at the siting or the routing of this pipeline. The community has very little recourse when it comes to eminent domain. In Texas, you just have to hire a lawyer, and you have to be able to afford to hire a lawyer. We have folks from Property Rights and Pipeline Center and the community of Van Horn, Texas here today that are protesting this pipeline, and they're working with a coalition of about 8 or 9 other organizations, landowners and business owners in the region to protest the way that this is being done. There was an emergency responder that wrote a letter to the railroad commissioners at the last open meeting saying that there are no trauma centers within a reasonable travel distance of Van Horn to be able to treat somebody that is affected by this pipeline. And there are portions of the pipeline that will go within a tenth of a mile of residential areas. And the railroad commissioners essentially ridiculed the community members that went to talk to them to ask for their support. Safety is in the Railroad Commission's mission statement. And they said, we don't do siting or eminent domain, go somewhere else. There's no one else to go to. Like, what is supposed to happen here? We're just supposed to let unsafe decisions be made? And it's just, that's fine with us? Like, it's not fine. And we need some recourse, and we need to give the public back this power to redirect these pipelines or say no. And to top it off, just to give a picture of the community of Van Horn, the population is about 1,800. It is predominantly Hispanic, Latino. More than a third of the population has limited English proficiency. There's no information that comes out from the Railroad Commission or the companies in Spanish. The median income is about $15,000, and about a third of the population does not have a high school diploma. And so, when we talk about PHMSA's, social metrics map that they are putting out there, that's great, but is that being used by the industry to decide where to route pipelines so that they get less pushback because people don't have the resources to push back? Or are we going to put some laws into place that prevent these communities from being unfairly targeted? Okay, do I still have time? Yep. Okay. So I'm going to kind of take things in a little bit different of a direction that you might not have expected, but I think there are some real new threats coming to communities, and we need to be thinking about other ways that oil and gas development is impacting and could impact the safety of pipelines. And so we do a lot of work on orphaned wells, and there's also a new threat coming with carbon dioxide injection. And so there's 2 types of wells. Well, there's one type of well that the Railroad Commission already has primacy to permit and oversee, and that's a Class 2 injection well. So these are wells that are used to dispose of salt water. They can also be used to inject water or carbon dioxide for enhanced oil recovery. It's a way of scraping more oil out of a spent well. And so these Class 2 injection wells have been causing several problems to the landscape of Texas, one of which is blowouts from unplugged wells. Some of those are orphaned wells that have no owner that the Railroad Commission is responsible for plugging, and some are just inactive wells that still have an active operator that have never been dealt with. But the thing that I want to underscore is that these Class 2 injection wells have been well documented in scientific literature to cause surface uplift, to cause sinkholes, and to cause earthquakes. And I believe that these are risks that we need to consider with respect to pipeline safety, and especially with the advent of carbon dioxide pipelines and carbon dioxide injection. And so the Railroad Commission right now is seeking primacy to permit and regulate Class 6 carbon dioxide injection wells. We don't know if this is going to come to Texas, but it is likely to come to Texas because we have all the right saline formations next to carbon-emitting sources. And so this is an example actually in the Gulf. So Diceta is is just outside of Houston. And this is a sinkhole that started to form in 2008, and it started growing this year. It's about 1/10 of a mile from an active Class 2 injection well, and the Railroad Commission has not done anything to address the injection that's going on in the region, even though we know that that injection is linked to the sinkhole. This is a sinkhole out in West Texas in Pecos County. It's the diameter of about 5 football fields, and every time it rains, it opens up FM 1053. That's a farm-to-market road. That's the landowner you see on the right. And so this also is a sinkhole that has shown up in some of that scientific literature as having a correlation with Class 2 injection. And so, just to bring it back to carbon dioxide, probably most folks in this room, I should have included a photo, have seen what happened with the Denbury Gulf Coast pipeline in Mississippi, right? This was a carbon dioxide pipeline situated along a roadside. They had a landslide, and the pipeline burst and harmed a lot of people who were driving across that roadway. And so that's our real concern with carbon dioxide, right, is that people caught in these CO2 plumes could be harmed. And that's why I'm bringing up all of these sinkholes, the earthquakes, the surface uplift. Just last week, we had a magnitude 5.3 earthquake again in the Permian. That was the second largest that we've had in Texas history, and these are all linked to underground injection. Another one? Okay, I missed that one. What magnitude was that one yesterday?
I don't have the exact, it was 4.
A magnitude 4. And so, and you can go to TextNet through the UT Bureau of Economic Geology to see that data if you'd like. And so House Bill 4557 was presented to the Texas legislature this year. This is a bill that would have made it extremely difficult for anybody impacted by any CCUS facility, start from carbon capture to pipelines to carbon dioxide injection wells, to file a claim against a company for non-economic damages. Non-economic damages include things like injury or disfigurement. And these long-term health impacts that we saw from the community in Satartia, those kinds of impacts, people would not be able to make economic recovery for. So, we know people still have like memory loss from going through that CO2 plume. And so, the person that you see on the right in this photo is Ashley Williams-Watt. She is a landowner out in the Permian Basin that has experienced a lot of wells leaking on her property, likely due to a massive underground blowout, potentially from Class 2 injection. And those are inactive wells that still have an active operator. They've been getting some of the wells plugged, but then as soon as they plug one well, another one starts leaking. And, she testified against this bill. She was getting ready to sign a contract with a carbon dioxide company for an injection well, and she said that if this bill passed, she was not going to sign that contract. Bills like these pose a real threat to the public. Nuisance is one of the only ways that a community member can file a lawsuit against a company when they cause harm, and a bill like this would have taken away that ability. I had one more thing that I wanted to say, but maybe I've made it enough points already. So with that, I'll just end here, and you can use that QR code to sign up for our email list. But I hope that we'll all consider these new threats that we're bringing into communities, and also deal with the conflicts of interest that are preventing us from seeing true pipeline safety today.
Thank you, Virginia. Next, we have Eloise Reid, who's a coordinator with Louisiana Against False Solutions Coalition.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to recognize that we're in Bulbancha, and we're the home of the indigenous folks of the Houma, Choctaw, and Chitimacha lands. And my name is Eloise Reid. I've lived here for 10 years in Bulbancha, New Orleans. And I think it's important just to recognize, I grew up in a state where the most industry stressor was dairy farms. And I believe that the folks of Louisiana and the Gulf Coast deserve the regulations and the livable future that other places in America are afforded. And I think when that is recognized, that we will have a livable future. And I just also want to share that we're educated, as you can see, we're organized, and we deserve a just and livable future. So I just want to start with that. And I have the honor and privilege to coordinate a group of amazing organizations that make up the Louisiana Against False Solutions Coalition. And I'll just kind of go through who they are. That's me. We're going to skip me. But I also wanted to recognize some of the members of our coalition who grew up here and are from here. And so this is Justin Soleil. He's an organizer with True Transition and a citizen of the United Homa Nation. And this is Travis London. He's an amazing organizer from Donaldsonville, a father, and has been working in the environmental justice movement in Louisiana for over 18 years. And a lot of the successes are attributed to these folks doing the work on the ground every day. So this is our coalition, and we started in 2022, and we are made up of a lot of the organizations you see on the screen here. Just to name a few: Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, Healthy Gulf, Alliance for Affordable Energy, Louisiana Bucket Brigade. We also work with a lot of incredible national allies and supporters: Center for Progressive Reform, Center for International Environmental Law, Earth Justice, Earthworks, True Transition, Taproot Earth, and others. And this coalition came together to organize for delaying or hopefully denying primacy, like Virginia was speaking about, in Louisiana for carbon injection, toxic waste injection wells in Louisiana. And as Angelle mentioned, we still have not received primacy. Louisiana Department of Natural Resources, which is underfunded organization and a mismanaged and frankly does not provide safety to the people of Louisiana, still has not received primacy for Class 6 injection wells, which would continue to overburden already heavily industrialized communities where people, like I said, are dying of cancer and other causes. Welcome to Cancer Alley, y'all, and please make sure that we're respecting the struggle that's been going on here for decades and centuries. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about our goals and objectives, and it's amazing to see so many allies in the room today because we work across Louisiana and across the Gulf and across the U.S. So we are hoping to have a just transition away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy in a future aligned with human rights. We are exposing, hopefully, carbon capture, toxic waste injection as a non-solution to the climate crisis, developing this united front, as I mentioned, and we have all of the support of these other folks that some of y'all are in the room today. And we want to mobilize and educate communities to make informed decisions. And I moved to Louisiana as an educator, and I grew up with asthma. And I would teach students about environmental science and gardening and education. It was lovely. I got to work on the what are we actually for side of things. But every day I would go to bed and think, this isn't enough. We can talk about what we're for, but as long as folks aren't, the children that I used to teach for 7 years aren't able to breathe, and now are seeing the combined impacts with the swamp fire that Angelle mentioned. This isn't the livable future that they deserve. So I think about the youth and their future all the time, every day. How do we do this work? We are versatile, we are vast, and we do a lot of different things as a coalition. We have experts from all over who are helping us lead media, communications work, policy work, research, budget, primacy, and education and outreach, like I mentioned. And some of our wins and accomplishments, first of all, we'll say delaying primacy, also delaying a lot of the permits that the companies that are coming to Louisiana to try to build the carbon capture projects and pipelines still have not received a lot of their permits, and a lot of that is because of the organizing on the ground that's already been happening here. So I wanted to show some of the images of what we've been doing, because that helps. This is our research map. It'll be out next week, hopefully, or the week after Thanksgiving. And we have a map that's tracking all of the permits that have been applied for in Louisiana. And actually, this is with a group called January Advisors. They've done amazing work with the coalition, and there's going to be a continued phase 2 of this, where we're going to get all the permits from the Department of Environmental Quality, and also, so you'll see all of the build-out, the proposed build-out, and some of the existing pipelines on this map, which is on our website, which I'll share at the end of the presentation. The policy team has done a lot. With us are organizing an education day at the State House in April, where we were supporting a lot of state representatives who were trying to pass bills to regulate carbon capture and to either move carbon capture out of their communities or just ensure more equitable and community voices. So we had an amazing event and turnout at the State House. These are all of the written comments, and I'm hopefully going fast enough so I can show this hearing video that was created as part of our media work and as part of our policy work to highlight the voices of community members speaking out against the state receiving primacy. And there's a video, so you'll see that in a second. This is some of our outreach and education work. This happened in October. We had a group of concerned residents of Lafourche Parish, which is about an hour and a half away from here. Gorgeous, beautiful, picturesque community, wetlands, swamps, healthy, thriving, and threatened by industry. And I don't know if folks are aware of, the siting of a lot of these pipelines and injection well sites being placed in rural, predominantly white communities, which has really allowed the environmental justice movement to become even stronger. And we've been referring to it as kind of both sides of the pipeline, making sure that we are recognizing the fight of environmental justice, predominantly Black communities in Louisiana, and their legacy and their continued organizing, as well as the new community leaders we're seeing come out of more rural white communities trying to protect their way of life, their culture, and their livelihood. So that was an amazing organizing meeting we had last month. This is I'm sorry, I can't call her doctor. This is Monique Harden. She is Esquire, and she is the Community Engagement Policy Director at the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. And this is some of the work that our media team has done. This was an education of journalists, local journalists, where we took them on a community tour. This is our community tour. You'll hear from Jade in a minute later today. On the left is Sarah Sneath, the Guardian and Floodlight journalist who broke the story on the saltwater wedge in Louisiana. And then in the middle, that's Travis London with one of his children who came and spoke about Cancer Alley and about the continued citing of fall solutions in already burdened communities. And we also got to go to the Bayou Corn injection well failure site, where they had to relocate an entire community as the sinkhole from a saltwater class 2 well kind of displaced and the entire community. So that was another connection. And more of our media work, this is in Lafourche Parish, Bayou Buff, and we're making more films and more videos, so really excited to share those with y'all. This is a team of Frontline Media Network. That's our subcontractors for the media work, and they're doing amazing work. So that's a lot of the work we've been doing. Let's see. These are our strategies and lesson learned. A lot of this is just that we have shared trust and relationship knowledge, spokespeople, and we honestly celebrate our wins. It can be disheartening to live amongst this much industry and to constantly feel like people are forgetting about you. So it's so important to have that collective joy and connection, because that's why we're gonna win, y'all. So that's why we're gonna win. This is me, and this is our website, lagainstfallsolutions.org, and we have all of the, social media accounts as well. Please follow us. And now I'd like to play the video. Not sure, so if I can do that. This is their first video that was made to highlight the voices speaking out against primacy. I'm not sure who is the tech person. Okay, so I don't know. Oh, here.
My name is James Hyatt. I was born and raised in Southwest Louisiana. I'm raising 3 children here.
I am a citizen of the United Home Nation, born and raised in Dulac, Louisiana, in Terrebonne Parish, where it's recently announced that over 40,000 plus acres are being surveyed for a CCS project. I am an oil and gas baby. My late father, mother, brother, and most of my family works in some part of the industry.
I'm a lifelong resident of St. James, where my family has been living for generations. I am opposed to the EPA giving LDNR the authority to grant permits for Class 6 injection wells for carbon capture.
My father retired from a refinery. I spent 10 years working inside a refinery. We cannot continue down this path and allow primacy to be in this state.
I am joining a chorus of folks who have spoken before you today to say that the state of Louisiana is not ready to take on primacy for carbon injection wells. Frankly, the state of Louisiana is not ready to take on carbon injection wells.
I was in the oil and gas industry for 10 years as a blowout specialist. If Louisiana is given the green light on primacy and permitting of Class 6 wells, much of the wetlands, waterways, and our coast will be destroyed.
This video shows a rupture of a buried, dense-phase carbon dioxide pipeline. The experiment was conducted in the safe environment of the DNVGL Spade Adam Testing and Research Centre to assess the consequences of such ruptures in terms of mass outflow, crater formation and dense gas dispersion.
I think that it is an experiment, and I think that our lives should be taken more seriously than to experiment by putting carbon underneath the ground.
It was Saturday night that the pipeline burst near Satarsha on Highway 433. 300 people evacuated.
Over the weekend, dozens become sick and even more had to leave their homes after a gas leak and explosion in Yazoo County. Around 300 residents evacuate their carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide that leaked into the air after the incident near Satarsha.
I knew about all the wells and stuff up there, but I didn't realize just how dangerous it could be.
They responded to that pipe break as quickly as they could, but not before the fumes made people sick. One woman said they were so strong, she thought she was going to die.
Already, Louisianans can see at least 27 proposed carbon capture projects on the horizon.
Folks ask me all the time, well, why can't we meet somewhere in the middle? But there is no middle ground when it comes to stopping an explosive pipeline. Either you do or you don't.
We need jobs in Louisiana. The thought that carbon capture is going to be the way forward and that is going to allow for good paying, clean jobs is not true.
We have thousands of untapped abandoned wells. We have pipelines that are not being regulated properly.
We need to be closing the wells that are currently leaking methane. We need to be hiring and creating jobs for people to close those wells, to resolve the issue that we currently already have. And now is not the time for us to be experimentally injecting waste under the ground.
So thank you so much. Thank you for watching. And yeah, please stay tuned on our website. We have 2 other videos coming, one in December and one in January, about the dangers and they're all risk and no reward. And with that, I'll pass it back to Bill. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Eloise. Next, we have Cynthia Robertson, the Executive Director of the Micah 6-8 mission.
Sorry, y'all, I don't have a fancy PowerPoint. My name is Cynthia Robertson. I go by Cindy. I am on the ground in Southwest Louisiana. In 2018, I bought a house in Sulphur, Louisiana on the wrong side of the tracks, much to my family's dismay, to serve the folks in that neighborhood. I actually live across from the railroad tracks, so I figure that the railroad situation is going to be my next learning experience. I founded and run Micah 6-8 mission there. And if I can get my computer back where I wanted it to be. We serve the low-income and unhoused folks in our area and folks in active addiction. If you aren't familiar with Micah 6:8, it's from the Old Testament. Paraphrased, it says, serve justice, love mercy, walk humbly. We are not a faith-based organization, but we are obviously faith-inspired. After the devastating effects of Hurricanes Laura, Delta, in 2020, and Winter Storm Uri, and the historic flooding in 2021, we realized that we have to go upstream and look at the justice issues because it devastated our neighborhood, our low-income folks, our unhoused folks. So when we went upstream, we found climate change, environmental degradation, and the environmental impact of the fossil fuel industry. So we started working with various national and regional organizations, and it quickly became abundantly clear that we need local organizations that focused on Southwest Louisiana. Because when we spoke to all these organizations, they talked about New Orleans and the bayous. And if you aren't from here, Louisiana is shaped like a boot. New Orleans is the toe, Southwest Louisiana is the hill, and then there's North Louisiana. And nothing against y'all working in New Orleans, it's all wonderful, but there was no focus on Southwest Louisiana. And there was a reason behind that. To understand the difficulty of environmental organizing in Southwest Louisiana, you have to understand that there was an organized disinformation campaign put out by Healthy Image Marketing, and it was funded by the Lake Area Industrial Association. It put out disinformation about cancer rates and causes in 2008, and they paid local physicians to promote this agenda. And in 2010, the Louisiana Chemical Association used the exact same campaign to declare that there were no increase in cancer rates in what we call Cancer Alley, but which they reframed as the industrial corridor. There is also the perceived threat of industry leaving our area. which will happen at some point, as fossil fuels will eventually get scarce, but folks they're not going to leave billions of dollars of investments there. And to be quite frank, people have been beaten, fired, and other horrible things for standing up to the industry in our area. So as we were, I got to figure out how to work my computer. So as we stepped into this narrative that was accepted in our area as fact, and into the confusing world of permits, permit modifications, hearings, FERC, LDEQ, and PHMSA. Well, PHMSA is relatively new on in my scope. And so it's one of the things I need to get to know about environmental work task lists, and I hope to rectify that at this conference, especially how to interact with the agency. After the hurricanes in 2020, the water in my neighborhood turned brown. Now, I don't know about you, but drinking brown water is not exactly what I want to do. But LDH said, Louisiana Department of Health said that it was safe. That is not exactly true because the EPA, the Louisiana Department of Health uses EPA rules and regulations on water, and those are 20 to 40 years outdated. So looking at that, I thought, maybe we have a problem even going up to the federal level. So, and you can find out about your drinking water at the Environmental Working Group website. They have for every place in the United States, just put in your zip code and you can find out how your water compares to up-to-date research. Ours also contained manganese. Now that's not magnesium, which is something I take, but manganese, which causes neurological damage. So I started going to city council meetings. I'm sure some of you are very aware of the glaring eyes in the back of your head when you go to city council meetings. And after months of work, our city finally got state funding to improve the filtration for our water. And while all that was going on, I was also working on disaster recovery after the hurricanes, getting people into what we called safe boxes. If they had a roof and there wasn't mold in there and they had walls and windows, it was safe. We still have many, many houses in the Lake Charles, Calcasieu Parish area that are with blue tarps and not completed on the inside. So let me tell you about moving to Louisiana in my teens. My father was a chemical engineer, and a brilliant one at that. He's got several patents, and for a chemical engineer, that's kind of unusual. And he started his career in West Virginia, where I was born. For those of you from West Virginia, I was born in McDowell County, so that tells you a lot about my people. We moved to the Kanawha Valley in West Virginia when I was in elementary school, and then to Texas, where he worked for Union Carbide, and next came Lake Charles, where he went to work for Olin. Engineers' kids are kind of like Army brats. We moved around a lot. There are pipelines over the road in several areas in Calcasieu Parish. When I learned how to drive, I avoided Old Spanish Trail because you had to drive under pipelines to get to Westlake, and that's where my mother taught school, and I sometimes went. And at night, it looked like a dystopian film setting, flares, noise, and then pipelines hulking over you as you drove through. Now, more years later than I care to define, I am unfazed when I see a pipeline spewing something into the air. I just call 911 and report it. That's not a normal reaction. No one should be so accustomed to seeing something leaking from a pipeline by the main road going into Westlake that they don't freak out. But we have so many petrochem accidents. Now, I know they're called incidents. I go to the LEPC meetings and we get reports on the incidents, but those are accidents and they can be harmful. They are harmful to us in the community. It's not normal to have accidents as a normal way of life. And as I've gotten into the environmental work, I've started paying really close attention, but sometimes I don't even have to pay attention. Like when the governor declared a state of emergency for our area, because the sulfur salt dome, which is about a mile from my house, is losing pressure and going to collapse at some point. I took a drive over there and got as close as I could to see, and all I saw were a bunch of pipelines running right through that area. Nobody has said anything about how that salt dome collapsing is going to affect those pipelines. We don't have any information about this unless we go digging into I'm not sure what website I go to, but it's not public, it's not open and transparent to the public what the dangers are when that salt dome collapses. And then I found out that they're trying to put a driftwood pipeline in between my house and the salt dome. Well, I'm only a mile from the salt dome, so that means that pipeline's going to run right by neighborhoods, the edge of my neighborhood, the low-income neighborhood that I live in. It's going to go close to recreational areas, churches, an elementary school. So what happens when those pipelines that run in those areas shift because the salt dome has collapsed? I have recently been appointed to the National Academy of Medicine's Community Climate Network, and I was in DC last week for our initial meeting. The effect of industry on our health, on our public health, is of great concern to me. Micah 6-8 Mission held a health and environment summit in Sulphur, where we have, 20 plants, petrochemical plants within a, 8-mile radius of where we had the event. I want us in Southwest Louisiana to have more information available to the public about when we have small pipeline leaks, which I get information about those a week to 10 days later through a listserv, but that doesn't help me if I'm in that area when that pipeline is leaking. I want us to be able to have information in real time. Our media doesn't do that because they're pretty much supported by advertising from the petrochemical industry. And I understand their reluctance to, bite the hand that feeds them. That's why we started a community radio station. Don't ever do that. That's a really hard thing to do. And basically, I just want us to be safe, informed, and protected. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Cynthia. Next, we have Josh Trosclair, the community organizer with Property Rights and Pipeline Center.
Thank you. And to be mindful of everyone's time, I'm just setting up a little timer here, so if you look down, that's why. No worries on the name, it's Cajun as hell. I get you. Hi, everyone. My name is Joshua Trosclair, and in the next 7 minutes, I'm going to try and distill the entirety of my 27 years of life, and probably a little bit more than that. So just to get out of the way, I do work in contract with the Property Rights and Pipeline Center, which is a very good organization. We mostly focus on going to landowners and explaining to them their property rights. We tell them whether or not current pipelines have eminent domain law backing them. Most of them don't. And that if they want to fight or contesting these things, we are there to support them. We have lawyers who can help them, and make sure that whatever happens, they leave satisfied, because as we all know, eminent domain is something that is rather tricky for people in positions of power and people with wealth. It can be something that can be used as a cudgel. And for those of us who don't have it, it can be used to hoodwink people. You know, let's just call it what it is. Now then, as for me personally, I'm mostly here to give a bit of insight on someone who's grown up around oil pipeline. As you guys have already seen, that's pretty much anyone in Louisiana, actually. I'm not particularly special in that regard. But I will say that I am also a member of the United Home Nation, and at the same time, a lot of my family and myself have grown up and worked in the oil and gas industry. I myself still have my CDL and my hazmat license, so I'm here to speak on behalf of at least the workers that I personally know. So growing up in South Louisiana, I grew up in Jeanerette. None of you know what that is, and that's fine. It's about about an hour away from Lafayette, 2 hours away from Lake Charles, 2 hours away from New Orleans. We're pretty much 2 hours away from wherever you'd want to be, but we're about 20 minutes away from Sippamau Point, which is on the coast. It's a local beach that I personally never really got to enjoy growing up because it is ubiquitous, the amount of oil and gas that have leaked into that waterway throughout the years. The water is not clean. It has little formations of oil patches all throughout of it. They've actually done a lot of work to try and clean it and do better, but it was at the same time that a lot of our public beach got bought out by a local yacht club. So, you know, they made it pretty for the rich folk, as all things are. Growing up, I used to, with me and my friends and my twin brother, we would race through the cane fields. And while we were dodging cane farmers who were really mad about us running through the cane fields, we were also made eminently aware of different pipelines where we could and could not play, where it was dangerous, where you could bring out your friend's four-wheeler and where you could not, where you could hunt for squirrel and deer, where you could not. It got to the point where a lot of things that affected us became almost urban legends. Places where if you wanted to fish, you couldn't fish. I personally like to imagine that it was the old spirit of Rosalie Coteau and you know, her pirate boyfriend that I'm sure y'all name of John Lafitte coming up and trying to scare all the kids. But in actuality, it was orphaned wells and leaking pipelines. Because while hope may spring eternal inside of rural America, so did the pipelines. I didn't bring a slideshow, and I do apologize for that. I think it would may have benefited, but I don't know if anyone's ever asked you to make a slideshow about the entirety of your life. It's pretty difficult. All along Highway 90, which is what Jeanerette is based off of, you can see the devastation of the lack of jobs, the lack of mobility, and the fact that we do live in an area that is a captured industry. Pretty much anything from Lafayette going on down to New Orleans, you'll just see the depths of poverty. Most people I know growing up worked in the oil field industry one way or another. My uncle Robert, who I'm named after, Joshua Robert Trosclair, passed away on an offshore oil platform. That was really difficult for my mother and of course my grandmother, that being her only son. But, you know, in case any of you guys are worried that you're talking to a rich kid, the oil and gas industry folks who worked that pipeline made sure to find my grandmother, talk to her, and not so subtly convince her to not take up any sort of legal action due to the fear and risk that Franklin, Louisiana, the small town that it is, which if any of you would ever like to go to Franklin, Louisiana, I'll take you to the Chinese restaurant. It's almost the only thing we have out there these days. But it's really good. It's my favorite spot. The entire town was pretty much employed by that offshore oil rig. And it was not so subtly hinted at that if they took any action towards, or any overtures towards seeking legal action, the entire town would be laid off. I myself, whenever I was in the trucking industry, like I said, I had my hazmat. I was put in many dangerous situations, carrying the various petrochemicals that heat various people's homes, and also the very specific synthetic paints that coat and assure us that it's all safe whenever these things explode, because they put on a very highly specific coating of paint. I never really got the science behind it, but I'm totally assured that that's how these things work. Also, my older brother, Sean Clements, throughout the entirety of his life was on and off the oil rigs as a masterclass electrician. He worked day in and day out to provide for his family. I saw firsthand how, having to be half in and half out of a household for weeks at a time, sometimes months at a time, can affect one's marriage, can affect raising a child. And I also saw what happens whenever that's taken away due to the boom and bust nature of our economy. And I also know that it can put you in dangerous situations, which is why in 2019, August 15th, 10 days after my birthday, my brother Sean Anthony Clements died in a salt mine due to lack of safety. He was putting in a new fire suppressant system, and someone went behind him and unlocked and untagged out his live wire and turned it on. So that is why I try and fight for workers in all things and the need for a just transition, because I don't want to see anyone else have to bury their sons. I don't want anyone else to have to be named after their dead uncles. And overall, I just wanted to say, the people who work these fields, the people who work these offshore pipelines, the people who we directly serve, they're some of the best people out there. They're hardworking people. They're some of the only people who believe in the American dream anymore. That's not me. The veil for me was pierced a long time ago. And I just want to say that I think it's beyond the pale that a lot of the rich people who make the decisions, be it the managerial class or the people who purely profit off of these things, they've managed to take some of the only people who still believe the American dream left and believe in hard work, and they break their bodies and they use them and they discard them. They leave them with subcontractor jobs that offer them no retirement, that offer them no 401k. I don't know if you guys know this or not, there used to be this thing called a pension, and there used to be these things called unions, and in Louisiana, we just don't really have a lot of that anymore. So thank you all for your time. Solidarity forever for all of the workers. And I hope that as we talk about safety during this conference, we always keep in mind that there are real physical people, and all of these rules are written in blood. My brother's blood, my uncle's blood, and for a period of time, it was almost my blood. So thank you all for your time.